humanitarian crisis that's been happening. And so we have three panelists today. One is Jose E. Lopez. He is an instructor here in the history in the humanities and social science department. And he also teaches history of the Caribbean and Hispanics in the U.S. since 1800. He was also one of my instructors when I was here in alumni. Awesome class, totally enjoy him. And he's one of the biggest activists here in the Puerto Rican community here in Chicago. And our second panelist is Gabriela, and she's here. She's a student here at a senior, and she's going to be talking about her situation, what's happening in Villalba, her hometown, what's happening in rural areas in Puerto Rico, and her situation here as a student, and everything that she's going through as a senior, and also helping her hometown. And finally, our special guest is Congressman Luis Gutierrez. He's going to be speaking to us today about everything that he has been doing as a congressman, what the government has been or has not been doing to helping out Puerto Rico, and things that we could do to help out. And so if we could start, there's seats if you just want to take the stage, and there's also microphones. Thank you. And then afterwards, we're going to open it up to a Q&A. Thank you. Oh, and thank everybody for the presiding committee. If you could all stand up, who's part of the college assembly. So everybody could, for putting this together in such a last minute as well. Lillian's here, Diana from PFAC, Lauren Targ, and then we have two student representatives, also Chris West, who has helped us out, and then Eric Scholl from interim chair of the science department. And so thank you everybody for putting this together.
Let me obviously welcome all of you, and thank you for coming. And obviously I have some of my students here, and this is obviously a privilege for me, given that many years ago, Dr. Wilfredo Cruz and Congressman Luis Gutierrez, we coincided at Northeastern Law University a long time ago, and I started my teaching there at Northeastern. So it's a long time ago, but it also appears like it was yesterday, because many of the issues that we are confronting, particularly what my passion, what drives me, is really the situation of Puerto Rico. I tell people I was through a biological accident, I was born a Puerto Rican. Therefore, my task in life is really to be able to be committed to the issues, particularly those issues that concern the Puerto Rican people in terms of their human rights violation. And so, today, Puerto Rico faces perhaps the worst crisis in its history. And Congressman Luis Gutierrez will speak to that in a few minutes. I am so honored also to be with Gabriela. She is an amazing young woman. The very moment that the crisis hit Puerto Rico, she began a GoFundMe for Villalba, and I hope all of you will respond and become part of that effort. The situation in Puerto Rico is obviously one that has come to the fore because of the natural crises. First Irma and then Maria. These two hurricanes hit the island. Maria obviously devastated the island. There's not a single part of Puerto Rico that was not hit by this hurricane. The only hurricane that comes closest to this was actually in 1899, San Ciriaco. And that hurricane transformed the island of Puerto Rico completely. It was a few months after the U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico in 1898. Almost 1/4 of the island of Puerto Rico was left homeless in that hurricane. And At that very moment, the United States imposed an economic problem on Puerto Rico, and that it declared that every Puerto Rican peso had to be traded in for 60 cents of a US dollar, meaning that Puerto Rico immediately loses 40% of its national wealth. And thus, we enter into this colonial situation, which is the unnatural problem of Puerto Rico. So we're dealing here with a natural catastrophe, obviously the hurricane, and an unnatural reality, which Puerto Ricans have had to confront since 1898. It's unnatural because, as I tell my students, Puerto Rico was defined in 1922 in a case entitled Belsic versus the people of Puerto Rico. The U.S. Supreme Court declared Puerto Rico belongs to, but it's not a part of the United States. So when anybody tells you Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, that is a lie. Puerto Rico is a possession, a piece of property of the United States. And there's a long legacy in the Caribbean. And obviously, if we saw the Caribbean from a sort of a regional area, this hurricane that impacted Maria and Irma devastated many parts of the Caribbean, and many of those are direct colonial possessions, like Dominica or Guadeloupe or Montserrat. They're direct possessions, or Saint Martin, direct possessions of the French, the Dutch, and the British to this day. And so there's something really wrong in a relationship in a colonial relationship. It's not human, it's not humane. It obviously has passed its historical process, if it ever could be justified. And Puerto Rico, out of all of those, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are the only ones that are direct possessions, because even Dominica has an autonomous relationship where Dominica can carry on free trade with all countries, can get all of its goods in ships that are from foreign countries, something that Puerto Rico is not even allowed to do through the Jones Act of 1920. So when we look at the situation in Puerto Rico, we obviously are looking at a natural catastrophe and an unnatural reality. But let me just say that here in Chicago, as part of the Puerto Rican diaspora, there are 5.5 million Puerto Ricans in the United States. There are 3.5 million Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, and we saw it as an immediate responsibility of ours to take charge of the situation. Since a month ago, literally, since a month ago when this hurricane devastated the island, we were the first community to send a plane load of goods to Puerto Rico through the efforts of Congressman Luis Gutierrez and Mayor Rahm Emanuel. We were able to get a United plane that took goods to Puerto Rico. It was the first plane to land and brought back 300 people who were stranded at the airport in San Juan. After that, we have sent out, and 2 weeks ago, Congressman Luis Gutierrez went to Puerto Rico and was able to deliver food and materials to the town of Comerío, where 80% of the housing has been destroyed, to Loíza, another area that was very hard hit, to Toa Baja. And the next day we were able to take Tuay Bonito, Naranjito. All total, we have taken materials to 7 towns and cities, including San Juan, in this period. And we're continuing that effort. And we've done that with obviously, we've garnered about $240,000. Every penny has been well spent directly on the field in Puerto Rico. And so Congressman Luis Gutierrez will speak to that in a few minutes as well. So I wanted to at least allow for Gabby to speak about her campaign and what she's doing, and then we'll be joined by Congressman Luis Gutierrez.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much again. It's an honor to be sitting with two amazing panelists today as well. Thank you so much for the Assembly for inviting me. I'm obviously a one-woman operation, and it's been great. The response from the community here at Columbia and in Chicago has been great. I live like 2 blocks away from Casa Puerto Riqueña, so the first couple of days from the hurricane, it was amazing to see how the Puerto Rican diaspora in Chicago came out and late hours of the night just packing the shipping containers. Like, it was amazing to see how the community here has responded, because I grew up in Puerto Rico 18 years of my life, and then I came to Chicago for college, for Columbia. I've never visited Chicago before, so it was kind of like on a whim I came here. And again, the response from the community has been amazing. It feels like a second home, so that's been great. But a little bit about Villalba, the town of Villalba, and my campaign. Like I said, I grew up there and my family is still there. So my mom's a doctor in Villalba, and nobody can take that woman out of Puerto Rico. Like, I've tried before, not gonna happen. So she's still there, working there. It's a town of about 26,000 people, and there's no hospital. We only have like an emergency room. They call it the CDT. And you can just imagine, like, 26,000 people, barely a hospital, no gas, no electricity. And I've only been able to talk to my mom a handful of times, and she's told me, like, she visited the hospital and their water reserve tank is like almost gone. Like, water is just like scarce everywhere. She owns a pharmacy there, so the water that she was supposed to get to give to people was taken by FEMA. So there's like a lot of things, and obviously the communication, since it's been so scarce, it's hard for them to communicate from Villalba to Ponce, which is like not even 30 minutes away. It's even hard for them to communicate and relay for such a rural area. So sometimes from Chicago, I find out things that they don't even know. So, and yesterday, a map from the Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, the electric company that powers Puerto Rico, they, so out of the 78 towns, there's 78 towns in Puerto Rico, 2 of them still remain powerless completely, Vega Baja and Villalba. So the rest of them, even though there's still, like electric, they call them electrics, like outages in areas of other towns, there's partial electricity in like most of Puerto Rico except those 2. So that's obviously a problem in itself, and the generators are also a problem in terms of like environmental issues as well. For the long run. But from here, I was, the first 7 days were complete desperation. I had no idea what to do. Again, and I don't have family members here, so it was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how they are. It was, a worry of mine. And then once I finally got to talk to my mom, and she told me like that they were okay, but that most of the town was, completely obliterated by the hurricane. I got this idea of creating my own campaign from another friend that adopted her hometown. She's a medical student in Philadelphia. And, in order to create more impact as an individual, as a student, I thought that if I adopt my hometown and I can provide direct relief there through my personal channels that I have there, it'll create more of an impact locally. Because it's so overwhelming as a 21-year-old alone in the States, like, you have no idea what to do. And I don't count with like as big of a team. That was kind of like my first response. And we've been able to service families in Villalba with water filters, over 33 families in rural areas with water filters. So it's been great. And it's all thanks to you guys for sharing and donating and helping me, raise awareness for this issue. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
So I'm sure that later on we'll have time for questions, but I think it's really important for you. I know almost everybody in this room knows Luis Gutierrez, but there's obviously a part of Luis which I've been able to see for over 4 decades, and that's a very human side does not really impact on, well, it does in many ways. It actually informs many of the political practices that he has undertaken. As a student at Northeastern Illinois University, he was very active in a lot of student activities. But it's there really where he developed a deep sense of his Latinidad, and particularly his work with the Mexican and Latino community. He's become perhaps the most important voice for immigrant rights in the United States, bar none. And I would dare to say that there are about 30 congressmen, Latino congressmen, who are either Mexicans or other nationalities who have done almost, I mean, if we were to put this in quantified levels, it doesn't reach any, it even comes close to what Luis has done for the immigrant community. I think Luis has stood up against incredible odds in defense of human rights issues like LGBTQ issues, around issues of the African American community. I mean, his record is truly a progressive record that is also truly embedded in his relationship to our community in Chicago, where he was raised and where he spent his college years, but as well as his engagement and involvement in Puerto Rico itself. And I think that because of that, Luis has carried on an amazing work in Washington, D.C. When you look at his 25 years of being congressman and the work that he has done, I would put it next to any congressman or congresswoman in terms of his advocacy for human rights issue. So he took this issue of Puerto Rico, as he does all the issues that he gets involved in on a very personal level. And it is personal for him. It's personal for all Puerto Ricans who are living this nightmare and trying to awaken from a nightmare that we cannot awaken from because it's real. So I want Luis to tell you his experiences. Obviously, many of you have been able to listen to his messages in Congress, and he's taken on the Trump administration perhaps unlike any other elected official in this country. So obviously I want to welcome Luis and have him talk to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Jose and I have been friends. He was my college professor. I studied in his classroom with my wife, Zoraida. November 19th, which is the official day the Europeans found us. Día que se celebra el descubrimiento de Puerto Rico, porque no existía antes que llegó Cristóbal Colón. It was just an island, but then they discovered it. But the good thing about November 19th, que es día feriado, right? So it's an official holiday in Puerto Rico. So every time my wife, when we retire, we'll always have our wedding anniversary and make sure that everybody's off work. We can have a party on our wedding. Nobody, at least not in the government, has to work. Gabby, thank you so much for your story.
Thank you.
I think Gabby's just, a wonderful example of being Puerto Rican and what that means. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one of the things it means is that whether you're there or you're here, you feel such a connection to what's happening and to what's happening to the people on the island of Puerto Rico. And it really is still one people. And I think those things have to be decided much later, as long as there's this colonial relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States. We're going to have Gabby, we're going to have me, we're going to have that connection. I don't know how the connection is going to evolve and change later on, but it will evolve, it will change. But right now, it is still one. I want to say to Dr. Cruz, Wilfredo, I saw him downstairs when I walked in, and I looked at him. He said, hey, I looked at him, he said, Wilfredo, that's all it took. And 40 years it went, and I'm real bad. This memory of mine is getting, but I remember you very dearly and very fondly. You started teaching here 25 years ago. I started in the Congress 25 years ago, and here we find these. I'll let Zoraida know that I saw you today. We'll take a picture, and I'll send it to my wife. She's always very in tune with all of the alumni. So where are we at today? So I think we have to understand this in the context of the colonial relationship of Puerto Rico to the United States. And here's why. Because the Congress of the United States last year passed something called promesa. Now, just see how cynical they are. They called it promesa, right? The promise. Now, I always thought of promise is like when I showed up, right, to meet my wife's family, I said, I'm going to demonstrate that I have a lot of promise, right? I'm going to do very, very well. So promise has always been, in my mind, a future in which things get better, right? In which you have attributes that are going to improve the situation. Well, promesa didn't do that. It imposed an unelected, unaccountable control board of 7 members. And then to boot, 4 of them are Republicans and 3 of them are Democrats. Sometimes that doesn't make that much of a difference, as we have Democrats that act like Republicans and Republicans that act like Democrats. The majority of them come from the financial industry that helped create the crisis. Now, the reason I say it's part of the colonial relationship, as Professor Lopez has already illustrated to us, right? Look at all of the ways. So I did the whole Ancestry.com thing with my daughter, right? Except I didn't like at the end of it go, I wonder if I'm still Puerto Rican. I watched those commercials. Remember that lady? She goes, I don't know if I'm Hispanic anymore. I said, you didn't know you were Hispanic before you went to Ancestry.com. If you could pay like $19.95 and question who you are. But anyways, here's the one thing fundamentally I learned, Jose, that my ancestors, my great-grandparents, they took care of themselves. They grew enough food to feed themselves. There was an economy that sustained them, and that they were self-sustaining. So what does colonialism do? It strips all of that away. It wants to make sure you produce what you don't consume, and you consume what you don't produce in Puerto Rico. And just to go to show you, they put this, Puerto Rico, $74 billion in debt. Okay, part of the reason Puerto Rico $74 billion in debt is because it wants to act like it's a first world country, right? So it wants to be like a state, right? But it really doesn't have all of the infrastructure, right, of a first world country, right? Has some of the infrastructure, has a very highly educated population, but it doesn't have control, right, over who it can do business with, nor who enters and exits. If you can't control different elements of your society and economy, you're not going to be able to compete. But here's what it does. So they said, hey, Professor, they said, oh, you know what? You know what the Congress is going to do? It's going to let Puerto Rico sell triple exempt bonds. What a great idea. And it was great for the portfolio of a lot of investment bankers on Wall Street and hedge funds. They said, what? I don't have to pay any taxes? You cannot buy a bond like that in Illinois. You can't buy it in California. You can't buy it in any of the states. The only place you can buy it is Puerto Rico. Sure, everybody said, give me some of that, because they all figured it was what? Guaranteed somehow by the government, right? Well, now the government is saying really that guarantee doesn't exist. So if you look at the way it works, now I want to explain to you, because I always think it's important, is that we understand just what the Jones Act is. Now, if I'm going to send something from Charlotte to Houston, okay, it's got to be on an American-built ship with an American citizenship crew and captain. I get that. But guess what? I have alternatives, right? When I ship something from Charlotte to Houston, I can send it on a train. I can send it, right, on a truck. I have wait a minute, I can start a factory in Houston and then I don't have to ship it at all. But guess what? Puerto Rico, as Trump has isn't he so illuminating? Puerto Rico is an island in the ocean, surrounded by lots of water. It's like somebody gave him the definition of, and then he said, ay, que inteligente soy yo. No, it's like, no, children do this. Children do this. When children learn something, they come straight home and tell their parents, right? And because it's and that's Donald Trump. Él aprende algo and he thinks he's teaching the world because all the rest of us are idiots and dummies, and he's the only smart one that learned that day. My point to you is, in Puerto Rico, we have to use those American vessels. It is the most expensive way. And people say, well, Luis, what have you? No, we don't get anything from China. We don't get anything from Europe. Everything we get comes from the United States and is shipped back to the United States. And so our agriculture, all of it has become dependent. How do you have a tropical island, right, that imports oranges, imports pineapples, imports, and we're starting not to, but still coffee? I mean, when you think of a tropical island, and you know what they have on a tropical island 2 years ago? The island went like no water. ¿Cómo tú tienes sequía en una isla tropical donde llueve todo el tiempo? Because you do not create the conditions in which you create the reservoirs, in which you have the infrastructure, so that you will have the water at the appropriate time that you need it. Because you go to all those bosques and you tear down all those trees and you chop them down, and now the mountains cannot keep the water for you, because nature is really smart. It has trees and vegetation, and it rains, and it says, I will not release the water until you need it. I didn't make that up. That's the way nature works. But now we have a really sad situation, right? Because we lost so many trees. We lost so much. So now when it rains, all the sediment just comes down those mountains. And many of these dams that you hear that were built for 50 years, but they were built 100 years ago. Well, guess what? They're full of sediment, which is making it even harder to get water to people. Then you saw this, it's outrageous. It's criminal. The first and largest contract to restore energy and to restore Puerto Rico was given to a company in Whitefish, Montana. The company's name, they're not an original, the company's named Whitefish. The town's named Whitefish, right? And you know, everybody can make a joke how smelly that must be, right? But my point is, and then they're in a town where the Interior Secretary, Zinke, happens to know the owner because that's his hometown, right? And you know, the internet, for all, I know I shouldn't be paternalistic or anything. To all the young people here that are students, I remind you once again, the shit you put on Facebook stays there forever, okay? So I'm just, as a dad, as a grandfather, I have to do this as part of what I do. Because I went on there, guess what I found on the Facebook? A picture of the owner of Whitefish Energy with who? The President of the United States. Another picture of his wife and him with of his daughter with the Secretary of HUD and Human Services, Ben Carson. Come on. How does a little, they only had 2 employees 2 weeks ago. Their largest contract was $1 million. Voila, let's send them. Do you know how much they're paying the workers? 218 people they brought? $500,000 a year. That's right. They're paying them $495 an hour. Now you do 8 hours a day, you do 5 days a week, you multiply it by 52, $500,000 lineman. You know what most people do? If Illinois' energy goes out and we have a hurricane or something happens, people come from Indiana. They come from Iowa. They come from Wisconsin. We have mutual agreements with those states, mutual aid agreements with those states. We help them restore their power. You say, but Luis is 1,000 miles away. It doesn't matter. Now the governor has said, we will call in with our mutual aid agreement to Florida and to Texas and to Georgia and bring the linemen in to work with Puerto Rican linemen. That's the way it was supposed to be. Pero con Puerto Rico, todo siempre sale mal. Now, I only bring this up just to share with you that if you had been at the airport yesterday, there are 2 flights. And I was talking about this to Dr. Cruz, he's a sociologist. El estudio tuyo es fácil. No, there's 2 airplane loads of Puerto Ricans, right? Non-stop flight, United and American. They land within an hour of each other. Mm-hmm. And there's like 200 stories, right, that arrive here in the city of Chicago. Nearly 70,000 have arrived already in Florida. Now, the reason I raise this is because yesterday, you know where they took one of the women off of the airplane? straight to Cook County Hospital. You want to know why? The insulin that she had run out of because she's on diabetes. And insulin needs what? Refrigeration. What does baby formula? What does a dialysis machine? What is a machine that fights cancer when you're having chemotherapy? What do all of the machines that your mother, that lovely woman, courageous, patriota, that stays there fighting for people need? She needs electricity in order to keep, and Puerto Rico, you know, anybody who studied us know we have a disproportionate number of people on diabetes as it is. So to me, it's even worse than just the corruption of who got the Starbucks at the airport, right? Or who got the contract to wash down the Capitol, or who got the contract to repave these streets. That stuff happens every day. It's wrong. But does it put people's lives at risk as this contract has literally put people's lives at risk? Now, Jose is very, very humble. He and the Puerto Rican Agenda have already raised over $180,000. I'm a conduit back to Puerto Rico. I make sure that the supplies get there. I jump on the airplane. We go there. We make sure. So that what we have done at the Puerto Rican Agenda is make sure that your dollars are actually $1. So if you give $1, you know there's $1 of something that's going to show up in Puerto Rico. So who did we send the first? We sent $57,000. I bought it. This is not an advertisement. They were just very, very nice. And I know that we all was protesting the folks at Walmart. But they own something called Sam's Club. And they had everything on pallets. And the woman was marvelous. We sent 57 pallets. You know when we sent them? The Tuesday after the hurricane. The hurricane was Thursday. That Tuesday, that afternoon, people were drinking the Infamil, the Ensure. They were drinking the Pedialyte, the children that needed to get rehydrated. So within, we did that. And we did that because we got some friends, and I called the mayor, and I was crying because it's impossible. It's impossible not to cry. How do you ask somebody for help and not cry when you know the devastating conditions that they're living under? So I called, I was crying, and I called the mayor up, and I said, I need an airplane. We got to send some stuff there immediately. Now, federal rules prohibit me from calling United Airlines and asking them for an airplane, because then I'll get like an ethics complaint or an indictment or something, so I couldn't do it. So I did the next best thing. They didn't say I couldn't ask the mayor to ask him, and he did. And he got the plane. So as far as on the scorecard, Rahm Emanuel got the plane. How it all started, bueno, that's a thing for another Mueller investigation. My point to you is this, that we feel very affected by what goes on. Now I'm going to be very short and tell you what I saw. First of all, 75% of the island still does not have electricity. I checked this morning. And the 25 that does is sporadic. Those generators that are in the hospital, like el Hospital de San Juan en Rio Piedra, Centro Médico. Any Puerto Ricans here, you know about Centro Médico. It's a large hospital. You know what it's running on still? Generators. So if the electricity has been restored, why are the generators still having to work at those hospitals? Because they're unreliable. I saw Carmen Yulín literally take 150 people out of one hospital and transfer them 2 weeks ago to another hospital in San Juan. And this continues. And then they give the contract to Whitefish, which shows you why we should be so outraged and angry at what is clearly criminal, because it's very important. Water. So understand something, and I learned this. You know, your sewer system and your water tables, if there are no pumps to pump that water and to pump the sewage system, guess what happens? They cross each other. And tú puedes verlo. I'm sorry, I have to say this in Spanish. I'll try to translate as best. You can see las aguas negras subiendo. You see them coming. Think of a drainage in where you live, right? You're going down your block in the middle of the street, and think of black stuff, water just coming up. That's the sewer coming up, right, onto your street. You walk on that, you catch diseases that affect your liver. That I can't say the word for what the disease is, but it's beginning to spread all over the island. Here's what I saw. I saw little babies with no milk. I saw, and then you have to understand, 500,000 people are homeless in Puerto Rico. Yeah, let me repeat that. 500,000 people are homeless. And a lot of them don't even have a tarp over their head. They're living out in the open. I met the most beautiful, think of a 13-year-old girl. And the girl, and the women in here, think about when you were 13. And the dads think of your daughter. I mean, I just saw my daughter. That's what I saw. I saw this beautiful princess all by herself. You know where she was? She was in an abandoned building that used to be used to house horses. Okay? It's an abandoned building. And that's where she was with her mom and her brother. And you say, well, está con la familia. Yeah, but there were two strange men that they don't know. I want you to think of a 13-year-old girl sleeping in a room with her mom with two strange men that they don't know. But it's that or the street. And like this, there are tens of thousands. Go to Loíza. I went to Loíza. Now, Loíza is very Afrocentric. Huh? It means it's very black. And you know, there's something strange about this persistence of racism and race, right? And prejudice. Because I have to tell you, the darker you are as a Puerto Rican, the more I saw the devastating effects of a society, right, that no longer had the kinds of underpinnings, right, of making sure that you didn't go by the wayside. It was really bad in Loíza. And Jose, we had the money, and there was this boy. He's a man. He must have been in his 20s. He was severely disabled. You could see it, mentally and physically, sitting on, and you know where he slept? On a mattress, just drenched with water. So we got him a mattress, and we brought him back the mattress. I know he was listening. I know the severity of his mental and physical. I know it was severe, but he was listening. Él entendía. And his mom kept crying, tráeme un matre, tráeme un matre. You know what we did that day? We didn't rest till we came back that day, and we brought that kid his mattress. If you would have seen him jump up and down and smile and try to move a body that is crippled. But he tried. He was so happy just to have a mattress. Think about that. And yeah, people are living with people, but it's 3 and 4 families in one. And there's one lady whose house survived, and she has propane gas. Ella está cocinando para todo el mundo, because that's the way it is in Puerto Rico. One lady cooking for everybody else in the neighborhood. But just think about it. Today is Monday, right? This Thursday is going to be 6 weeks? Yeah. 6 weeks. No electricity, no water, and even if you do, and think about, so even if you have a roof over your head, you're living with 3 other families. You're trying to find water so you can flush that toilet. You're all not fighting, you're all, right, trying to get the same food. Last thing is this. I told them, I talked to Senator Durbin, I said, you know those food stamps, the food stamps are on an electronic card, right? They can function like a ATM. I said, why don't you just let the people find whatever ATM they can and cash it for their food stamps? Because you say, pero Luis, why would you do that? Because the grocery stores are open, but they can't process the card. There's no internet, and there's no electrical system that allows them to do that. So I said, a simple thing. Let everybody use their card, go to an ATM, cash it. Then they could go to the grocery store and buy their food and buy themselves a little thing to cook with a little propane. Porque tú sabes, la gente, those meals, people don't like, la gente le gusta en Yabucoa. ¿Tú sabes lo que celebraron en Yabucoa? Arroz. Arroz. Can you imagine how bad that's your celebration? Rice. Rice, such a fundamental thing to eat. Rice. So I just want you to understand that we're going to continue. I'm going back this weekend. We're going to go visit Jayuya. We're going into the mountains. We're going to take resources there from Chicago this weekend. I feel that that's my responsibility to take as many flights and to take as much as I can as you do. And so that's what we're going to, Gabby, as we're going to, so that's, I haven't put it all, but I want to make sure we leave a lot of time for questions and answers.
Before we open up to Q&A, Jose, could you and Gavin, how do we donate? And Luis, how do we help out?
Okay, so I passed out 2 pieces of literature. I hope all of you have it. If not, we have some more available. One is an article that Luis Gutierrez wrote, an op-ed in the Tribune that I hope all of you will read last week. And 2, there's an event that will be happening. There's a series of events happening throughout this coming week. But next week, on the 10th and the 11th, a group of artists have come together, and they're going to do a art festival on Paseo Boricua between Division on Division Street between California and Western. And throughout the area, there will be artists will be exhibiting their artwork. They will be some of them will actually be painting. They will sell some of their artwork. The restaurants in the area will be open. Several of the cultural centers like Africaribe with Bomba en Plena, Urban Theater Company will have some performances. There will be films. All kinds of things will be happening on Friday and Saturday, November 10th and 11th, that I would hope all of you would join. This is a particular fundraiser that is aimed at the reconstruction of a very important school in Puerto Rico, La Escuela de Artes Plásticas. It is the only independent higher education institution in Puerto Rico which produces a lot of the artists of Puerto Rico. It's an amazing space, and it was devastated. And so some of the artists actually from Puerto Rico are going to be contributing their artwork, so it will sell here. So please, if you know anyone, pass the word that's interested in art, in music. We definitely need your support. In addition to that, you can look online with the Puerto Rican Agenda. There's a place to donate as well. The Puerto Rican Agenda is carrying on an ongoing campaign. We're sending another plane load. We just brought in 2 truckloads of goods from Madison, Wisconsin this Saturday. And we have a church that's almost completely packed with goods to be sent by plane to Puerto Rico. This will be our last plane because the plane, what we learned, and particularly through the intervention of Congressman Luis Gutierrez, is that it's better to buy things in Puerto Rico than actually to send them from here, including water. So we're doing that. What we want to do also is send cash. The problem is that there is no, people, restaurants are open in certain parts of Puerto Rico. Supermarkets are open, stores are open, but people cannot purchase anything because Puerto Rico, as a first world economy, depends everything on using, obviously, your cards.
And let me just say, so one of the things we did is we sent the mayor of Comerío $5,000, and I took it in cash. It wasn't easy. I'm not used to having, I'm used to having ATM, getting whatever money I need. I'm sure everybody lives their life that way. It gets very, but the first thing he did with the first $500, just to show you how bad the response of the American government is, he went and spent $500 on water, on bottled water. Why do we have to send $5,000 from Chicago so America can buy bottled water? And this was going on week 4, and the water was still insufficient in that town.
So we've sent, actually, Luis took $17,500 in cash to 3 towns in Puerto Rico. So it's really important that you understand the importance of monetary donations. So we're carrying on a campaign online to raise money. Obviously, we're going to continue this campaign. We're calling the campaign Rescue, Relief, and Rebuild Puerto Rico. And the idea is to have a long-range strategy for the rebuilding of Puerto Rico. And we're going to invest in the infrastructure of Puerto Rico. We're going to invest in creating a viable, sustainable economy that people, there's no reason why in Puerto Rico, a place that produces cement, a place that has enough sand to produce incredible, literally windproof glass, a place that obviously has enormous amounts of sand, has obviously untapped resources of the sun and the wind and the water. So Puerto Rico is literally an island that is on top of an underground river system. That means that in Puerto Rico, everybody can have fresh water. You could build a house in Puerto Rico that could withstand 250 miles of wind. You can have every house in Puerto Rico have access to water, and every house have access to energy. And it's renewable and sustainable. The Puerto Rican economy has never been an economy, as Luis said, that responds to the needs of the Puerto Rican people. We need to rebuild Puerto Rico on an economy that is obviously Puerto Ricans can sustain and is renewable, and it can be done. And that's what we're committed to. We're also here in Chicago on the end of the rescue. We're carrying on a whole campaign for evacuees. I can just tell you, Rush Hospital has announced that it will open one of its clinics where it will do complete medical examinations for free for everyone who comes from Puerto Rico, and then sign them up for medical care. We have, obviously, the doors of CPS are open to any students as if they were homeless. There's no questions asked, and they are enrolled in the schools. We have open, the mayor has really done a really effective job in terms of trying to welcome the evacuees from Puerto Rico, who he himself called the first, and listen to this, the first climate change and global warming refugees, and Puerto Ricans are. Because that's really the problem of the hurricane, is really fanned or fueled by global warming. So I want to say that the rescue, the relief, and the rebuild are the sort of the pillars of our campaign, and we're going to continue it. And so look up anything on that you can on the Puerto Rican agenda, and that obviously could be helpful.
For sure. My campaign is through online as well. It's GoFundMe/Vijalba. It's Villa and then LBA, I guess, yeah. And basically, doing the same thing, buying from here, taking resources over there, giving low-income housing or people that have lost their homes that are in refugee centers in Puerto Rico, let it be high schools, other people's houses, to give them the cash they need in order to buy the things that they need. And we're also collecting donations and supplies in this building on the 4th floor at the SDI office. So even if you can't contribute monetary, if you have anything you would want to donate for us to ship, it's on the 4th floor of this building. But yeah, like you said, it's so personal to us, and it's kind of hard to take away from the personal, if that makes sense. And that definitely, with hearing all the different stories, I always make that joke that I'm on Puerto Rican Facebook because I have so many people from back home. So I see, these crazy stories. Like my grandma's neighbor, he's 68 years old, and he was putting up a tarp, because he lost his roof, his zinc roof. So he was putting up the tarp with his son, and it was the ground was so saturated that he fell and he snapped his neck, trying to get a roof in his house. So that's one of the many horrendous stories of people not being able to come down from the mountain to get dialysis treatment. And the government, or the local government of Villalba, getting to their house and already like being too late, you know? People with leptospirosis, people with, I mean, my mom had to take out, what do you call those, nails? People were impaled with objects, and that creates tetanus problems. So, and vaccinations are low, you know what I mean? So all these issues are, it's hard to not make them personal, because it's people in my hometown that I grew up with, my friend's grandparents suffering from not having insulin, you know, it is really, really personal, and that's why, you know, we share the same sentiments of wanting to help our people. And it's hard to think of long-term when there's so much things happening in the now. You know, people not having food today, people not knowing if they're gonna count with fresh water to drink tomorrow, or fresh water to make milk for their babies, you know? So that's why we're so passionate about this cause, and you know.
Let me take some questions.
Yep.
The microphones are open. People can just grab a microphone and ask questions.
Hi. As I understand, the Puerto Rican government has canceled its contract with that weird whitefish company. Have they found another group to work with?
You know, not that I know of, and so we've wasted this very valuable time. What Gabby just told you about is, I'll try to bring it in another reflection that I have using what she just described to you as the man 60-year. So I went to the hospital to see my brother-in-law, and he had lost his middle finger and half of his other two fingers. And I went to go see him the Friday before I left because he was trying to start a generator. So people do things that they're not used to doing. And, you know, I'm not a scientist about this, but in the hospital, there were a lot of people, Gabby, that fell off a roof, that fell off this, that put a nail through there, that tried it, like my brother-in-law tried to start a generator and then lost their fingers. Because these are not things that I wouldn't know how to put a roof, a tarp, and get up on a ladder and do these kinds of things. And, you know, that's why you have skilled people, but they don't exist. So the hospitals are filled. So there's another part of what's happening is here, and here's what you're going to find. Any real examination of Hurricane Maria is going to find that many, many more people died post the hurricane, and many, many more people were injured and sent to the hospital post the hurricane than during the hurricane. Because people did go and find shelter, right? They did go and find shelter. The problem is once you leave that shelter, now you have to survive. And you have to understand the hostile situation in which it is almost impossible unless you've been there to see what it's like to live without water and without electricity. To see the mosquitoes. I mean, I never put so much mosquito repellent on myself as I did. I wore boots everywhere I went. Boots on a tropical island. It's really hard. I had access to those things. At the end of the day, I had a room, right, to go sleep in and to go rest. But people don't rest. I don't even want to think about the psychology of people, right? The mental fatigue that must, imagine you lost your job. Imagine you lost your company and you don't have any water and you got a bunch of your neighbors or your relatives living with you and there's no water and you don't see like light at the end of the tunnel. You keep hearing, then you hear this whitefish thing and, well, here's the good thing. Man, it's like, I gave a homeless man $1. You know what he told me? Keep fighting for Puerto Rico. I said, I found that interesting. I said, he's homeless, but he still gets the news. But he did tell me that. And I tell you that story because it's really a wonderful reaction of young Puerto Ricans, right? Like they come, you know, in the neighborhood, yo, Gutierrez, what's up, brother? I saw you on the 25 years old, and they're listening to my speeches on the house. That's pretty incredible, right? That just doesn't happen. Now, if you're undocumented and you're Latino and you're 25, you probably did hear my speeches. That's something that's been pretty consistent. but not young Puerto Ricans. And what we have found is young Puerto Ricans are watching, listening like you guys, and they're getting very involved. And I think that's an incredible, beautiful thing that I want to express. And not only them, but across. I go to the airport. I mean, just people of every race, every ethnicity coming up to me. And you know what? Like the same way they used to tell me, keep fighting for Planned Parenthood. You know, don't let them take away the funding. And I would hear that from people when we would get into a big fight. That same thing now is keep fighting for Puerto Rico. And these are Puerto Ricans, obviously, but a lot of non-Hispanics are doing it. So I don't know where the contract is. We're going to stay on FEMA. We're going to have a big solidarity tomorrow in the House of Representatives. You know, I went, and Congressman Espaillat and I from New York, he's the first Dominican American. We sent out a letter to all our colleagues to have a solidarity day tomorrow, Wednesday. And you know when it's a good idea when they copy it. So we sent it over to Leader Pelosi, and now Leader Pelosi's leading Solidarity Day with, but maybe, you know, she'll let us Espaillat tonight, who were the original people of the ideas. But many times in these situations, if you ever get in elected office, if there's somebody more powerful than you, and you can give them the idea, although it's yours, better to let them take the idea and make it a reality, and you bring the justice to people than you bringing the idea, because you ain't got the power and the clout to make it happen. So I've learned that along the way. I'm gonna come and teach with you one day, you and Jose here. But I want to teach like politics.